going to build upon them in our two other sessions. So what we want to cover here are all of the basic reportings, and in addition to just showing you the basic reportings that we would be showing you during a new system install, we're going to cover on a couple of the other ones that still touch on basic functionality of the system, but our focus is a little bit going to be more geared towards configuring the reporting and looking at the settings, and then also what specific information you should be looking at in those reports. So there's some basic functionality here, and I'm going to touch upon an NCR function that lets you have even more advanced remote access to the basic reporting functionalities in your site, so that there are some ways that if you happen to be an operator on your site and are caring about the basic functionality and the basic reportings, but you're not present all the time on your site because you're an owner operator who has a life outside of work, or if you are an owner who is not the operator but still want to make sure that you're keeping tabs on the basic operations of your establishment, there's some functionality that we can touch on as well for that. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and go through the reporting basics, and we just want to talk here about our fundamental basic reports. There's a couple assumptions I'm going to make. And the premise here is that we want to keep an eye on these reports in a timely fashion. I'm not looking at giving you a crawl down of here's how you can pretend you're an accountant and crawl through every individual line item of the reports and analyze the numbers and put them in spreadsheets and that kind of thing. We're looking for the big flags, the big indicators, and then how we want to dial down and look into those a little more specific. If we're looking at something that goes beyond that kind of time commitment, what we find is that it's cumbersome and you won't actually spend the time to dig into those reports to that level. And that's what NCR is there for, to provide solutions for things that are a little more time consuming or a little bit over your head in terms of water that you're not really comfortable swimming in. If you're not really a numbers person, but you seem to have the flags or the indicators that there's something worth taking a look at, then we're going to touch stone on some of the NCR things that allow you to go ahead and get a heads up for what those things mean in a more understandable format than just looking at numbers on our reports. And with that, I'm just going to kind of jump in. The premise or the position that I take when I'm looking at a lot of these reports is that people seem to think that when they're going through the reports that they need to pay attention during certain seasons more than others because their staff is more likely to try to get away with things during busy seasons, or maybe they're going to try to get away with things during a slow season. And you'll hear people assume in both directions on that. And the difference here is it's always the season for your staff to try to get away with things. And sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's passive. But the reason is you just don't know what's going on in your staff's life. You know the traditions hold that people assume my staff is pressed for money because it's the holiday season and they need to buy Christmas, or it's February and it's the slow season and they're having trouble paying off their bills from Christmas. But really, you don't know if your staff has things like medical bills, car payments, medical emergencies, just life. There's things that are going on with them all the time. So we're going to look for some of the key indicators that are maybe your staff is trying to get away with something, as well as the indicators that are indicating that we need to fix some things in our system. We set up some things wrong, we configured some things wrong, or maybe things have just changed and it's time to go into some more stuff. In the first part here, as we go through these, I'm going to focus on the basic reports that most establishments run on a day-to-day basis or at minimum weekly basis. And then we're going to build on this in our next session. We're going to talk more specifically Thursday about these are the reports that we want to get into that are not just telling me a basic level of what's going on in my establishment, but hopefully the reports that give us an idea on the areas that we can grow sales, we can forecast from, and start building on those sales and building on this as a tool to make us proactive, not reactive to the events in our establishment. So in Aloha Manager, I make the assumption that you're all on new Aloha Manager that looks like this. If you happen to be using an establishment that still has the old version and your desktop does not look like this, please let us know. That means we need to go ahead and schedule some upgrades with you that we've probably been trying to reach out to you already. This back wallpaper where it says Aloha here may look different on yours, and that's okay. That is actually a website. So if yours looks different or has text or messages, feel free to not be alarmed when that updates and shows you some additional information. Sometimes we'll post things there about upcoming upgrades or changes in credit card information, things that you may need to be aware of. So the first report that we want to look at here is your basic sales report. And there's multiple versions of this that you can use at your location. And of course here I'm talking about the pathway at the bottom of the screen. You can see there we're looking at reports, Aloha Point of Sale, sales, sales, and then summary. And the summary report is what most people think of when they're talking about the basic establishment, what's going on in my location. This is where they're going to go. They're going to try to get the basic reporting sales value. This is also where you're going to have the first of your red flags popping up. It's useful if you think about this report as being one side of the ledger. This is showing the sales information, and it does touch on and have a little bit of overview about our payments, but we're actually going to go to a payment detail report later that's going to have the other side of that ledger. So if you're not seeing the payment information on here broken down as much as you are expecting it to, that's okay. We're going to take a look at another report soon. So when we look at this, you're going to get this pop-up window on the right side here. So once you select that, you'll get the sales report here. Usually you can go ahead and just choose the summary report. You don't have to choose the weekly. If you choose the weekly, it'll ask you to go ahead and choose which days you want to look at in 7-day increments, and it asks you for the first day of the week. Most of the time you can go ahead and just choose the summary report, and then you can highlight the days. When you go in here, if you select a date and then you select another date, it assumes that is the first and last of a range. So it will go ahead and fill in the intermediate dates before you, so you can scroll up and down. And when we look through this, we have here our reporting. We have a pull down that's going to give us access to multiple versions of this report. Oftentimes we'll set up a version of this report for the on-site managers. That will give them the overview of the information they like to see in order to do their shift. You will also see that we will do a report quite often for bookkeepers or off-site accountants. If we need to, you can put us in touch with your bookkeeper or your accountant, and we can get this information sort of rearranged on their report into a format that makes sense for them and get rid of some of that extemporaneous information that we as managers like to see on our reports. We like to know how many guest counts we're going to have or how many tables during a meal period, but your accountant doesn't need that information. So as we go through here, that will be true too also with our labor reporting and any other reporting we do. If you need us to help you create versions of it for additional staff members who don't need access to all that information, let us know. Once we do that, you can add a report to create an additional version, like I said, or you could delete a version if you've got a whole bunch of them and the staff has changed over time. The settings here will allow us to make changes to it, and we're going to look at some of those settings as we go through here. And then you can also view that report without sending it to a printer, or if you know it's already configured the way you like, you can just send it directly to your printer for a paper copy. Now, those are not going to be able to be exported in that way. So if you do have to export that for some reason, the export button actually just saves it to the local machine. It does not allow you to put that in special formats. It doesn't allow you to send it as an email. It just allows you to save it as either a rich text format or as a comma separated value. What we usually do for that is if you have a special need where you need to export the data, reach out to our support email, and we will help configure that. We put a shortcut for it to make it more manageable, and depending on how you are getting that information to another location or how you are doing it, then we work with you to find the best format that interacts with whatever your recipient of your information needs. So going through from that, the sales report as a whole looks like this. So your sales report is typically about 4 pages. I've seen some people who are a little crazy for information get it super long, and they get it down to about 6 pages, 7 pages maybe. And I've seen people who can actually pare this down to 1 page because they just don't need that information for the way they run their operations. Our basic configuration when we set this up for you is going to be about 4 pages long. And we're going to look at some of the key indicators on here. Now you can see here we've got sales and we've got sales. So what we're looking at here is this is actually going to be your gross sales and your net sales. And we have the ability to relabel those and rename them. And what they mean tends to be different depending on who we're speaking to. Some people include comps and voids in their gross sales. Some people only include taxes in their gross sales. So that's one of them that's configurable. And all these sections here that we look at can be added or removed. Anytime you see a big bold-faced title here, that means that whole section can be removed or hidden, or some of them can be expanded out because we want to see additional details in it. We could either see a comps total, or we can see a breakdown of the individual comps that we've used in our restaurant. So the basic things that we're going to look for here are starting with the void section. And the voids on a sales report, and for Aloha's purposes, is any product that was not made but was rang in. So usually when we see a substantial amount of voids, it's probably a training issue. What we're looking at here is staff members who did not know the price for an item, and so those staff members went ahead and rang in an item in order to see what the price was of it, and then didn't delete the item before it was sent back to the kitchen or to the bar, or they just went ahead and ordered them and just kept going and kept going and kept going. Or if they walked away from their system and it timed out and went ahead and placed that order for them. So the voids in mind here mean usually that we're looking at either a substantial amount of a training issue where somebody doesn't know how to find pricing accurately, so they're playing with a computer system to find out pricing, or it means that items were genuinely rang in wrong, which is also a training issue. So these are the items where somebody rang in the wrong item for a table, or they rang in a wrong amount. Typically, this will happen in a banquet environment, or if they're using food miscellaneous, or if you go ahead and ring through a large amount of gift certificates during a holiday because you're going to let a hostess stand outside and just sell them on the premise, and they're already rang through the system, and then she doesn't sell as many as you had expected, and so you need to come back in and void those out. Comps are the first category in here, which means the product was in fact made by the system, but for some reason we did not receive full value for it. And typically this is a reactive situation. Theoretically, our customers can be unhappy about any given product in our establishment. It can be because of the service or the product itself. We see discounts given under comps for customer satisfaction, coupons, and all sorts of things. Anytime we see a large surge in comps in here, this is something that we want to keep an eye on and find out what the root of it is. And we can set the comps up individually to also require the staff member who's applying that comp to be able to have to type in a reason for it. So it's not just a customer satisfaction comp, but they can type in a reason so it shows up in the reports as customer satisfaction comp cold soup. And those will appear on the guest check, so we still want to be careful on what we type into those messages, so the customer will see those messages, but it gives you a little more detailed report. And also we can encourage you to make as many comp categories as you would like to keep track of, and then we can combine them and lump them together on your sales report. But we can't do it the other way. Once we've dumped everything under owner comp, then it's just all under owner comp. We don't know why the owner comped it. But instead, we can go ahead and have owner comp for marketing, owner comp for loyal customers, owner comp for exemplary employees, and then we can have them all report onto the sales report as owner comp. But if we needed to, we would have the ability to show more detail and break those out. Once we go through the additional comps in there, we want to take a quick glance over here at our taxes and make sure that everything is being correctly accounted for in the taxing side. Oftentimes when managers are adding new items quickly in a hurry, or they're doing a large amount of menu changes, they'll be copying items or rushedly making blocks of new items, and we just want to make sure that there was no oversight here and we accidentally put something that didn't need to be in that category. Everything should have a tax ID assigned to it, whether that be inclusive or exclusive. And you can see we have a breakout section here for exclusive at the top and then inclusive below it. There should be almost no refunds ever seen in the system. That should be an exception. And if you see something appearing as a refund on your sales report, that's usually a very large flag of something that we need to go investigate or look into, because a manager had to take an exceptional step in order to do that, and it had to have been turned on in the system for you, which means that we foresaw that there was a need for your establishment to be issuing refunds as well, whether because historically that location has a lot of complaints and refunds, or deals with a lot of people coming back from previous days service. Examples of that would be if you were using a large amount of repeat customers, local businesses that you allow to run accounts with your business, and maybe you want to have an opportunity to go back and refund a day that you hear about later when talking to the owner of the business on his employee's behalf. Anything over here on your guest counts by day part is a big indicator as well. Managers typically on hand will have a good idea on what normal guest counts are during a given meal period. If you're an involved daytime manager, typically senior managers tend to work the daytime shifts, meaning they tend to be there so that they can handle marketing questions and deal with vendors, both placing and receiving orders. So they usually have a good idea for what's going on with your lunch and afternoon guest counts, breakfast time afternoon guest counts. But the dinner counts, they may be a little less familiar. So we can take a look at our guest counts. Oftentimes this number is transcribed into manager red books if you happen to be using those for your establishment, or if you're using an online log or a digital log for your managers. This is something they keep track of because they want to routinely view back to previous years, same day previous year. So same day if it was a holiday or if it was a busy weekend, often with notes to account for weather to indicate why it was exceptionally high or why it was exceptionally low on a given day. There are some advantages to using the NCR services to keep track of this information. The NCR services, like our restaurant guard, will also keep a lookout for behavior based on your day parts and your busyness. So you can see on the reports there that they will indicate for you what's an unusual amount of voids based on a lunch doing that volume on that given day of the week. Up here, no make is a theft avenue. It is a place where people can get away with doing theft. You really shouldn't have too many no makes. Sending an item to the kitchen with instructions for the cook not to make it usually indicates it was already made. So oftentimes, if we were ringing in a ribeye and the kitchen made a mistake and they sent out a top sirloin to the table, we're going to go ahead and ring in the top sirloin so we can charge the customer for the correct price, but it's already at the table. We're going to ring that in don't make and then void the ribeye, which wasn't made. That's a logical sense for this. But if it was possibly a recurring thing during the day where kitchen staff makes their own meals and then goes out and tells the bartender to ring it in after the fact, that's usually not okay in most establishments. They're not allowed to make the item without the ticket already being in hand for that item. So you want to make sure that nobody's abusing that by doing things out of order or taking steps to make their own meals without approval from a manager, that it's okay to go ahead and put an order in for themselves. Under point of sale reports, we also have employee and then our labor report. And that's the second basic report we run every day. The pop-up for this one is just a little bit different. In addition to choosing the date ranges here, we also have the ability to choose the employees that we want to run this for. Selecting all employees is normal. That would give you your overview for previous days. If you ran, say, a 1 week or 2 week, depending on your pay period report, and only selected an individual employee, that would actually be a report that would be their time card. So that's one way you can run individual time cards, and you can actually print those, one employee per page if you wanted to include those within their paychecks. Most of the time, what we ask you to do is keep track of your labor in a timely fashion, because while we can remote in and help you take a look at sales reports and payment reports and things of that nature, what we can't do here is remote into your staff and tell you if Dave was working last night. So we want you to make sure that your managers are reviewing this, hopefully next day. It's awfully hard when you're going to run payroll to try to look back at a 2 weeks labor report and remember if did Dave work last Tuesday or did he call off and Sarah worked for him. It's really hard for anyone to remember. Whereas at least if you're on the same day and you see an employee didn't clock out yesterday, and we're going to see how we would indicate that, it's much more timely for you to go back on the same day and say, what time did they leave last night, while somebody still remembers. So the report itself, when it comes up, is configured out here where we've got the employee's number, their name, and then you can see for them we have an individual line entry for each shift that they worked. So we have the date. And if you are running this report daily, which we encourage you, you should only have one, at most 2 lines for this employee. You may have a second line if they worked a double or if they had a different job code. They worked part of the day in the kitchen and part of the day in the front of the house. So if they've switched jobs. And what we're looking at here is a breakdown of their hours and then a summary for that employee. And then at the end of this report, we also have a summary for all of the job codes. With that said, we want to make sure that your employee is clocked in under the correct job. So a quick scan down here should tell any manager who's been involved with their shifts, both the schedule writing or just managing the shift on the previous day, did everybody clock in correctly? So the instances here, what we'll have commonly that people are doing is if they're a dishwasher and they make a higher rate as a prep cook, perhaps they accidentally forgot to go ahead and clock in under the correct job code because maybe they have a pay rate coming up or something to that effect, a due bill or rent. So they accidentally did it. And there's no harm, no foul in most cases, because if the manager catches them and comes back to them and says, hey, you clocked in wrong, they just say, oh, sorry. So one of the things we can do to alleviate this too when we add the employees is back in the back of the house under their job codes, we can make sure that their primary job code that they work most of the time is set up as the first one in the list of the employees' job codes. That way if they forget to choose the correct one, we've most likely defaulted to the one that they are working. Other instances of this in the front of the house are server trainers clocking in as server trainers even when they do not have a trainee on that day, just for the higher rate. So if you don't catch that you had a server trainer working but you did not have anybody working under the job code trainee, then you would not notice that that was a mistake clocking as well. Timeout, your system will run an end of day at the morning. For most establishments, this is either 3 or 4 o'clock. So if you see a time here that says 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., chances are that meant that your employee forgot to clock out. And so we want to timely correct that before they get paid for overtime and before they throw off our overtime warning reports for the rest of the pay period. If your establishment is a 24-hour establishment, then your managers often have to go ahead and manually do the end of day. And if so, it's best that they make a note of what time they do that. That way, your managers who are working the next day know what time they're looking for as an indicator on here. If they are choosing breaks, or if they are required to in your jurisdiction, some of our areas require people to offer paid or unpaid breaks. Were those appropriately taken or not taken? Those are things that can go ahead and affect your payroll as a whole too. If you have a large number of staff not taking the required breaks, that can add up rather quickly. Also, if they have overtime, making sure that it was planned and approved overtime. If it is approved, great. Sometimes that happens. Again, we want to be making sure that we're keeping an eye on being proactive, not reactive. We want to make sure that we are planning for it only when it's absolutely necessary. For instance, like we're covering somebody's vacation, not because we are planning for it just because somebody likes to pick up additional hours and will switch into shifts because they like the overtime pay rate. Also, down here, was the shift edited, and is it appropriately edited? What I'm indicating here is that we're looking at employees who have had their time edited in one way or another. Sometimes you will not be aware of the relationship between your employees and staff. You may have a manager who has a rental property or an extra room they're renting out to a cook. Well, that cook is coming up due on paying rent to that manager. Did the manager edit their time to make sure that they had the money to pay him? Another indicator here can be that your manager is making changes after close. So you want to make sure that especially if you're an owner, you're keeping an eye on watching the watchers, making sure that your managers aren't waiting until the staff goes home at the end of the evening. You could go ahead and delete the employee's clock out, delete their checkout, void some of their items, pocket the difference, rerun their checkout, and then go ahead and edit the employee's time back to the time that they originally left, and the employee would be none the wiser because their hours would be correct. However, you would see a pattern of behavior as an owner that your managers are consistently the same manager probably doing same edits at the same time when there's no one there in the store other than them. And also then the declared tips, and this is to save you some additional headache. What we're looking at here on the declared tips is the value of the declared tips actually makes sense and is practical. We want to make sure that our employee declared their $120 tips, not $1,200 in tips. If they make a mistake like that and we can head it off before it goes to the payroll, then we save us some headache of trying to correct the payroll. We save the employee some stress from finding out that their payroll was zeroed out because they had to declare tax or pay taxes out of their paycheck on that many declared tips. And it's just easier for everyone to head that off and make sure they're correct. So just make sure they look in line. Sorry. Under payments, the payments is the other side of that ledger we talked about. So when we look here at Aloha Point of Sale and we go to the payment detail report, there really aren't any options that you can change on the payment detail report, and that's intentional. We don't want people to be able to alter the amount of payment that is received by your restaurant because that would be a huge indicator that they've got a way to steal money. So we just want to make sure here from our point of view that the payments information is correct. It's a good document for backup purposes for us in case we are audited or to have our paper records of things. Sometimes people will take this paper copies at the end of the period and move them off site. So these three here at the end of this one, the payments, the sales, and the labor reports are your three basic daily reports. Typically what happens on site is that these reports will get run as a paper copy, and then along with the server checkouts, all the credit card receipts with signatures on them, and any redeemed coupons or gift certificates or anything that affected the sales balance will all be put in a manila envelope with a date written on it. Usually people will take those dated envelopes, throw them all in a French fry box until they have the reports for the month. Then they'll write the month on the box and it goes off somewhere in storage until after 7 years or whatever their audit liability is, and then they go ahead and remove those. But that's kind of becomes your permanent record. So this last one here, when we view it, is at the beginning a top-down list of all of your credit card records, and of course it's concealed, but it allows you to match up your last records. So you can see I've got a credit card here ending in 4191 was the correct tip put on it. This is your backup record to make sure that your servers put in the correct information, because you can of course match it up with your paper slips that are signed by the customers in-house. This is the reason that you don't need to run the EDC settlement report. EDC is another portal into Aloha, but from the same information from a different direction. So your EDC report and your sales report will always match by definition because they are pulling it from the same location. So since you're going to have this information on your payment report, then that is our backup record of that. And then below that, at the bottom of our report, once we go past the credit card backup, we have an individual breakdown of all the additional payment alterings. So the comps and the promos here are listed at the bottom. And our comps are actually broken down in significant detail. So you can see here we know exactly what check it was, what time it was done, what comp they used. We know what the manager was that applied the comp. We know who the employee was, the value of it, the amount, what items were comped, and everything. So if we do need to go look back into it, managers will typically scroll down this, look for anything that's really significant or out of the ordinary from a previous shift. The general manager will want to know why the nighttime manager did a comp, customer satisfaction comp for $75 on a dinner. That's substantial, and we want to make sure that it wasn't because we have a problematic employee who's consistently doing mistakes. Is it a training issue? Was it because, time, busyness, normal understandable things, or was it something that's preventable and can be a learning experience for our establishment to make sure that we don't have to repeat that type of comp? After that, there's also a category that's below the comps called promos, and you may have seen that in the sales report. The promotions is a subset of our comps. So as I said, comps are items that were made but we received less than full value for. The promos are items that we received less than full value for, but we planned to. And since we made a plan to receive less than full value for those items, we could have set up rules regarding them. So we can make sure that if somebody has a coupon for $5 off of a dessert, we can set up a rule to make sure that before that's applied, we make sure that they actually did in fact order a dessert, not just taking $5 off of an appetizer or using it to get a free drink and so forth. So those promos will also be listed here with comps. So we can see here in this breakdown too, the fruits of us running coupons, advertisements, and any of our marketing things will also be summed up here at the bottom of this. You may also want to keep an eye out here too for one employee with a large amount of the same promo over and over again to keep an indicator out. So I ran a $5 coupon in the newspaper. I want to make sure that my employee didn't go grab a stack of 20 newspapers for $10 and then they use all of the $5 coupons that were in there to get $50 in sales and make $50 on their $10 investment. If we suspect there's a problem in any of those previous reports, our next step that we would go back in here to see what's going on in our establishment is to do what's called an audit. So, not to be terribly obtuse about it, but the system is logging all of that information as it does its transactions during the day. And it's in the background just kind of doing those things. That's what allows us to help you out and run logs and see what was going on and troubleshoot any problems you're having with your system or your hardware or anywhere else. The benefits of that for us are also, though, that we can go back and we can audit that system. So we can go back in and look at almost line by line, detail by detail, what our staff was doing. And this is kind of a powerful tool, but it can also be an overwhelming tool. When we run this information, you can actually get a report if you have a busy establishment, a lot of transactions, that can be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 70, 80, or maybe even 120 pages long. This is not something that you want to print out and you want to crawl through. This is something that you use to drill down into more detail when you're looking for something specific. I guess if you wanted to, you could run real long pages of this just to frighten your staff and sit out with a bar or a table in the front of the house restaurant with a highlighter and a marker and grill your staff and say, it's $7.53 last night. Why did you comp $4 off a glass of Chardonnay at table 8? Just to keep your staff scared that you're watching the numbers and that you're looking at everything they're doing. Most of the time what you would need to do is come in here and you can see we choose both an individual employee or all of our employees. If we wanted to, instead of filtering by employee, we could actually look for a specific check number if we knew exactly what we were looking for, or we just wanted to drill down and look at what the bartenders were doing or the waiters were doing, and by department heads. Then we can go and schedule a time frame. So if you're looking for a specific transaction, I can say, okay, I want to look into what happened at table 13 last night between 7 and 8 o'clock. There was some weirdness with a check. So we can come down here, we can see what payments were applied, we can see every time the individual staff member logged into the terminal, what they did not do. And this report comes up in a very, very detailed form like this. So when we go through this report, we start seeing here a whole list of who did it. So you can see it was applied by Irene, Okay, we get to see where they were standing because their terminal numbers are reflected in the check numbers. So in this instance, she might have been standing at terminal 8. So terminal 8 begins all of its checks with the number 8. We can take a look at how they did it. So you get to see a pattern of behavior. Did they apply something? Did they start ringing in an entree? And then when they got to the baked potato on that steak, they suddenly deleted the entire check and logged out. Okay, well, maybe that's an indicator, and you can walk through that they went back to the table to ask, I forgot to ask you guys what you wanted on your baked potato. And then they went back to the thing and re-rang in the whole order and finished it. So you can see the pattern of behavior. You can see the exact times that everything happened that they were doing, and you can also see that there's a whole story to be told here. This is very meaningful for managers that are on site at the restaurant because they actually know, okay, in my head, I know that that took place at Terminal 6, and they were doing this table, so they had to keep walking back through this portion of the dining room. It's not just for the obvious things in here, like transaction things, but say, for instance, even somebody was working back by the employee break room and a purse came up missing. Great, well, we can tell which employees were working at terminals and working around that area. We've used this before to establish that managers who were stealing, even on a day they were off, happened to be in the building because we could see that they swiped their manager's card to check sales as they walked through the dining room. So there's lots of reasons to go back and dig into this information if you know what you're looking for. If you don't, it's just going to overwhelm you. Then we have a product mix report. And the product mix report I often conclude as a basic report, and sometimes I include as a daily report, but realistically most of our locations are using this weekly. The product mix report gives you a breakdown of every item, the number that was sold, the price that was sold, and of course the profitability for it. If your establishment is very involved and you know the food cost for those items, fantastic. We strongly encourage you to go ahead and enter them in the individual items within the maintenance portion of Aloha. Otherwise, even without that information, there's still a lot of value in running this report. When doing your prep for the day, it's nice to run the product mix report for maybe the next 2 or 3 days. So rather than having your employees get out the turkey and the meat slicer and have to slice turkey and then spend a half hour cleaning up the meat slicer every single day, maybe while we've got it out, we know that we're going to sell traditionally 60 turkey sandwiches over the next 3 days. So I'm going to have them prep at least 40 today so that I know I'm good on tomorrow and I don't have to have an employee prep that. And you can divide your prep up to make your labor usage more efficient by knowing what your sales of individual items are going to be. Also, this is typically used by your kitchen managers to go back down the line and rearrange and organize your line setup to make it more efficient. If your top selling salad, for instance, happens to have tomatoes, eggs, cheese, and chives, then probably you want to make sure those 4 things are set up side by side on your makeup table as well as in a decent sized container. Make sure that you're using them in quarter pans or third pans rather than sixth pans. There's a lot of value to this report. Your managers will like to know it specifically for menu design and then also for your featured items. So if we know which items of your establishment are the most profitable items and our best selling items together, then we can use that for menu engineering and go through our site and make sure that we are placing call outs and pictures on our menus to encourage our customers to buy our more profitable items, as well as also for the training process for our staff. If your staff knows what the most effective items are, we can highlight them on the screen and make sure that when somebody comes up to your staff and says, hey, what's my favorite burger? All of your staff members should be giving the same answer. It should be the one that is the most profitable, or which one is a signature item for your establishment, because you know that once people try it, they're going to come back. There's better ways to use the product mix than just keeping track of the flat numbers of items sold. That way we can increase our profitability. Once we go through that, we can use the Aloha Manager also to track employee schedules. And this is a very high level overview of adding schedules because it's a very basic system. This is not designed to be they can remote in and look at their schedules and log in online. This is for a tool for you to use budgeting and also to enable you to be using some basic other reporting. And so what I want to do here is just real quick touch upon using the basic labor scheduler to set it up. What you're seeing here is the days of the week labeled across, and then a pull down that lists the individual job code. So when I do that, as long as I have my hours entered in here by dragging and dropping the shift, it's very visual, so you can see what your coverage is in a time period. We can see what our hours and our wages amounts are. So you can see here for this delivery drivers that I have entered in here, I didn't have their wages entered, and that might be because my delivery drivers are self-paying at my location. So we can look and see based on that what our expenditures are and make sure that our scheduling for our labor is falling within our budget. But the upside to that on a day-to-day basis for us is it warns us of overtime. So once we know the schedule for everyone that we're using, daily we can run back here and we can see where our system is. So instead of being reactive and saying, oh, it looks like my lead broil cook is going to have 50 hours, we can look at it as we're going and say, well, he was only scheduled for 40 and now he's projected to get 50. If that's because he picked up a shift from a fry cook who wasn't feeling well, then perhaps that fry cook is now returned to work and is able to pick up one of the shifts from the broil cook to keep the broil cook from going into overtime. And that would help him out by getting his hours back so he has a decent paycheck again. So we just want to make sure that we're using these tools to take a look at what our projected labor is. This is based on whatever your work week is. So if your work week starts on Sunday, then this report rolls Sunday through Saturday. If your work week starts on Monday, then we set this up so that it works Monday through Sunday. Also down here is a basic report, and this is the last section I'm really going to talk about here for reporting, is crystal reports. And these are not reports that you're going to run on a day-to-day basis, but they are basic because they're reflective of how your system is set up. So oftentimes this is something that, especially if you've had a change in ownership, we want the managers or new owners to look over to make sure that there's no surprises for them. How they want things laid up in taxes is correct and so forth. What these are high-level overviews of the database in your system. So unlike other reports where we configure them, these have absolutely no configuration to them at all. So you can see here we have the ability to view an employee report sorted alphabetically. We have one that shows pay rates, one that does not show pay rates. So if you are inheriting a restaurant or you're doing a transition, you can take a look and make sure you see what everybody's pay is. You can scroll down this as an easier way for you to see what is the average wage I'm paying to my cooks right now, so I know that I'm hiring within the correct parameters, whether I want to start hiring at a higher rate than that to encourage a better pool of labor, or I want to start bringing my labor down and hiring some people at a lower wage because I'm worried about controlling my labor costs. These are items that let you know where you stand on those. And when we look at these reports, they're just kind of lists to go down. You can see under the item report, we have the item number that we're looking at. We have the chit name, which is how it appears when it prints to either the bar or the kitchen. And the check name is how it appears on the guest receipt when it prints out. But the important thing on the item report is usually taking an idea and looking and making sure that we've got the default tax rates set correctly. So if you've been audited or you're looking at information or you just want to make sure that you're paying the right amount in quarterly taxes, this is a great place to start because it gives you a thing you can scroll down. Chances are your site has a lot of items in the database. So usually the way we suggest doing this is not printing out a 200-page list and sitting down and going through it, but it's something to go through kind of step by step. Maybe do a couple pages every time you and your managers sit down to do a manager meeting. Here, somebody scan this page and I'll do this page while we're waiting on our service manager to arrive. Little bits to go through it, and then if you're going through that, usually you can keep on top of any strange changes that were made. The employee job code and access list is good for managers and owners to make sure that nobody has access to the database that should not be having access to the database. That will show you your access levels, so who is available to be doing comps and payroll edits. Oftentimes you will be surprised. You will find out that there was a bartender who once upon a time was given manager access because a manager had to go to a doctor's appointment, and nobody ever remembered to take that manager access away from that bartender. So we want to make sure that both that we've gone through and audited to make sure that people have the correct access levels they should have, but also that if those employees are still in the system, we want to make sure that we go through and terminate our old employees, so those numbers can't be being used for any things without our knowledge. And hopefully if we're looking through our payment detail report, we would already be aware that that a manager, Zach, who no longer works here, went ahead and did a bunch of comps. Well, that would have been a huge red flag when we looked at that daily. And then our employee list here, and I want to be very clear about this, our employee list through this view has employee social security numbers in it. Because of that, even if you run the one without pay rate, this is not a thing that is designed to be hung up on your wall and become a phone list just because there's a column for phone numbers. Managers could use this, but please make sure that this is confidential information. If you are using it as a phone list for your management staff, keep it in the safe, keep it where it's out of reach for anyone, casual staff use. Other than that, you can verify correct information here. So you can go down and make sure that your staff has the correct social security numbers in. You can make sure that you do have some of the basic information. And again, this is where I said you would take a look at your employees' pay rates and make sure that they are all correct, or make sure that, if you have an amazing staff member, but you looking through this list and you see that they're underpaid, maybe it's the time to make sure that we pay them correctly before they get scooped up and go somewhere else. So it's just an idea that we can go down here. You can also see that everybody's individual job codes they have signed to them. Sometimes in establishments that have been there for a while, you forget that your lead waitress is also a fantastic and experienced banquet person. She just doesn't have the availability to do it often. But, in a pinch, maybe that's a person you want to reach out to and say, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Can you work a banquet this weekend? So once you've got the high level reviews here and you're looking at your daily reports, these are the fundamentals that we're going to build off of when we start going through a little more detailed Thursday to go through the second session. Because on the Thursday session, we're going to go through looking at how do we go to the next level in these reports, both in configuring them. What are some of the ancillary reports, things that we can do to see what our servers are selling and which servers accelerate or excel in selling, in training, how we can look at who our best delivery drivers are, those types of things as we go forward over our next two sessions in this. So taking a look at the basics here, is there any questions you would like me to answer right now? Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead in a moment and have Renee talk for a little bit about console, which is what I mentioned previously about some other ways for you to take a look at this information in these reports when you're not on site, so you're still not out of the loop. Sounds like everybody's comfortable on the basic reports. That's great. These are kind of the essentials for getting that information down. So I'm going to go ahead and have Renee talk here a little bit about some other reporting tools that are available and where they fit into the system. They build upon this as well, and depending on your use case, once you understand what the basic reports are, these are alternate ways to get that information as well as some additional information. So if you want to take it away, Renee.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We've also got Cameron Sloop on here, who is my counterpart in the territory, and he'll be working on showing this over the next couple of sessions. But Bill, thank you for that handoff. So what I'd like to do is do a brief overview of a product that we have called NCR Console. And what this does is it basically pulls the majority of the data that Bill just showed you into a web browser that you're able to kind of look at the data in a consolidated way. Okay, so really what I'm going to start with is this is the dashboard page. Again, this product's called NCR Console. NCR just released this product about 3 months ago. It was a product that we purchased from another company and have completed the migration or integration with Aloha for the reporting product. Not to give away too much information, but in the future, this product will also have an add-on for labor. We're looking at that probably towards the end of this year, and then next will be an inventory. So be on the lookout for new functions and features to this, but for right now, it is a reporting tool. So as you see here, and please stop if you have any questions, but as you see here, you are looking at your sales data. So basically, you can look at your monthly progress, and what we're looking at here is for the demo purposes, we have 3 separate stores. And it is showing for the month where these stores sit at in sales. So for an operations person or someone that just wants to get in here and see how you're doing for the day without taking all the daily reports and putting them in a spreadsheet and all that information, they have access to this. And what it does is it updates by day part. So they're able to just jump in here and get a quick overview of what the stores are doing. As you see over here, it's showing you your sales by day. So today's sales, previous weeks, previous years, as well as number of checks, average check, and guest count. Then you can look down here and look at your sales by week. It's showing your current week to date, previous week to date, and previous year, allowing you to do some comparisons to see where you sit compared to former years. And then down here at the bottom, it's showing your current sales performance for the month. Now, right here, as you see, we've got targets in here. These are targets that I'll show you in just a second. There's a feature where you can go in and say, okay, for this year, based on last year's sales, I would, this is what my targets are going to be for this year. This is what I want to hit. So basically, this is a number that you input, and then you're able to see where you are stacking up against that for the month. And then down here, you're able to do some comparisons of current year-to-date sales, as well as check numbers, average check and guess against your previous year-to-date and percentage of change. I will tell you that this information is available for historical purposes on a 13-month rolling period. One of the functions we do have, though, is you're able to export these reports, and there is a what we call a Dropbox feature. So where you're able to export the reports, you can save them, so then you can do the historical comparisons as many years back as you have this. It just has to be saved in an export file because the data will fall off after 13 months. Over here, you see a sales forecast. This sales forecast is based on the last 4 weeks of sales, or the last 8 weeks of sales, or the last 52 weeks of sales. It'll show you where you are yearly and where you are weekly. And as well as your day part sales that I talked about earlier. These update via day part. Any questions so far? All right. So what I'll do next is just go in real quickly and show you some of the features. So first, we're just going to pay attention to day-to-day in this particular segment of this product. And what you're able to do is we're able to click on day-to-day. And in a calendar format, it's going to show you what your sales were for that particular day. So if I want to dial into June 1st, I'm able to see that I did 45.58 in sales. And then what it's going to allow me to do is to see a bit of a breakdown for that particular day. I can dial in, I can look at my product mix for that day. I can view a breakdown of my gross sales, discounts, and sales tax. As well as I can look at my hourly sales if I'd like to. Now again, there, as we go on, you're going to see that you can do bigger comparisons. This is just if you want to look at a particular day, because let's say you knew that there was a parade in town last June 1st, or whatever reason, and you want to see what happened on this day, or you see a big jump. Typically Friday night sales are going to be a little bit bigger, but let's just say you see for this Thursday, July 8th, there was a huge jump. So you want to go back in and be able to view that and see what really happened on that day. And again, there's a logbook feature in here as well that I didn't even speak of, that you can actually come in here and make notes and kind of talk about what happened at that particular day. Okay. I am going to go ahead and step into the planning for just a second, because on the first page where I showed you the target, where you would go in and put that number, this is where you would do that. You would go into the planning function of this, and based on whatever data that you've been looking at before, you can go in here and set sales targets for yourself. So you can set them by week, by period, by month, by year, and that will then show up on the initial page of the dashboard. Next, I'm going to go over to reports. We'll start with sales reports. So I can look at either sales, I can look at product mix here, as well as modifiers and item sales by employee. Product mix is important to a lot of people, so I found this one to be one of the hot buttons besides just the sales reports for people. But let's just go ahead and dial in and look at the sales feature first. I can look at this by hourly, daily, weekday. I can also put in a date range that I want to look at reports. So let's just say I want to look at June 1st through June 30th. I want to update it. And it will allow me to see what my sales have done over the course of these dates. And because it's only June 21st, obviously it stops. I can also, if I choose to, I can go here and I want to see, okay, I want to see that breakdown by checks or by guest count. So if I want to add checks in, I then have my sales data, as well as I can look to see how many checks were made up for that particular day. And as you see down here, I can also look at it day by day for every day through June. I can look at my sales number. sorry, in the breakdown, or it's going a little bit slow, my internet here. And I can actually take a look at, while the demo is showing 0, but different metrics within my sales number. As well as, oh, sorry, here. I can view my sales by hour. I can also view them by day part. And I won't go through all those features for time purposes, but there's a lot of really good features in here that, again, you know, you could be pulling these reports on a day-by-day basis and collecting them and putting them in a spreadsheet, or you can come to this and you can set date ranges and be able to look at the information at your convenience, as well as look at the different breakdowns and date ranges that you want to. Okay? So next I'm going to go and we can look at the daily summary page. So basically, you're able to see your total sales, discounts, refunds, and again, I won't read them all to you, but a lot of different metrics based on this particular date. Or I can change my date rate date range if I'd like to, as well as the bottom down here, you can see the breakdown by category. And again, I'm doing this as just a general overview so that everyone kind of sees what they have. Cameron and I are definitely open to having a one-on-one to discuss really what your needs are and what type of reports that you're looking for so that we can walk through this individually as well. Next I have, I'm going to go ahead and go to key indicators. This is where you can pull all your information into, for all stores if you have multiple stores, and kind of look at some key metrics across the board for all of your stores. Now, something that I haven't shown you yet, but is available with most of those reporting features, is that I can then take this and I can either print it or I can export this information and then, again, email it to someone or save it in a Dropbox or do whatever I need to do with it. It's not just web-based. Again, you can export this information so that you can manipulate the data that you want to. Next, we have, if you go down to other reports, this is where you get into what Bill was talking to during some of his, where you can actually look at comps details, comps reports, promos, store productivity, tender type report. I'll just dial into the comp details report so you can see the format of it. I can set a date range, then I just simply run the report. And just look at the different comps and the reasons for them and who did them. And again, this information is exportable, so you can take it and you can manipulate it to look at reports maybe by comps by employee. You can take this and maybe marry it with a promo report and have all the information together in one. It separates it out for you for ease of use, but you can definitely take and, as I said, with exporting it, you're able to copy and paste and pull any report you want together with it. I'll look at other data here real quickly. You can also take with this custom data report, and as you see here, this is showing for one store right here as where you pull everything together in the key indicator report, but, and you can set security classes for these as well. So if you want management to use this tool, you could set it up so the general manager of the Beverly Hills store can only see the Beverly Hills or whatever store that you have. Now you can take and you can customize this by transaction account. And as you see down here, there are several different metrics that you can take and break this information down by graph, as well as at the bottom, it puts it out for you just by number, depending on how you like to view. And when it comes to this resources tab here, this is the Dropbox feature that I talked about, which is really nice for you. This is just a great way to be able to organize, you know, and, all the information, whether it be reporting or different information that you want for your store. It's, as said, I don't know how many people out there use Dropbox. I use it continuously to keep data together for, you know, what I do every single day. So again, this is just an easy way for you to keep all this information together. So when you need to go back and review it, it's all in one place. So any questions? That was a very brief and quick overview, but just kind of wanted to get it out there. This product, again, pretty reasonable in price. And again, we'll consolidate that data for you, taking out the work of pulling a bunch of different reports on PDFs and entering them into Excel yourself. It kind of puts it all here for you and allows you to see the main metrics that most operators are looking for. Any questions? Cameron, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Hey, sorry about
Okay.
that. I was coming off mute. I'm okay. But thank you. That was great way to cover it.
Okay, Bill, anything you want to add? I'm basically finished with my quick overview. And again, we would welcome the opportunity to discuss this with anyone individually if you're interested, and kind of talk about some of the stuff that you're looking for, and go from there.
Now, I mentioned, a lot of the times with the basic reports, tying that information into management communication tools like Redbook, and some of that information is built in here as well with the weather forecasts and things like that. So it's a nice accompaniment to managers who can't always be at their location and know that kind of information without going to extra steps to look into it.
Absolutely. This is pulling this data from Aloha, so it just saves you from dialing into a terminal and pulling your stores individually, or just, like I said, consolidated data for those people that want to see it all together. Okay, well, that's it for me today, and thank you for everyone's time. And Bill, anything else you want to add before we end the call?
No, I appreciate you covering over that. And as I said at the beginning, if you have any additional questions on something, or if a thought occurs to you or a question afterwards, you're more than welcome to reach out to myself here at support@integratedpos.com, or contact Renee, or we'll put you in contact with Renee and help you if it's something site specific for your location. Don't let that prohibit you from reaching out if you have any questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.
Thanks much.